Operation from the Canada Club visual approach runway 4 right.
Clear visual 4 right, maintain visual separation.
Combat 504, we have speed 170 over tower space. You get follow Boeing 727, 1 o'clock, 6 miles right stage, descending on 3500.
We got hit inside with 170 on the tower.
Combat 504, follow traffic, clear visual approach runway 4 right, maintain 170 on.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Autopilot on Podcast. I'm John. I'm here with co-host Scott. How you doing, brother?
Good, man. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing good. I'm in the Big Apple today. First time in Times Square for airline stuff. I was always stuck in Long Island with the regional, so it's good to make it to big leagues, I guess.
How's the hotel?
Outdated, and on the floor, I can hear every honk and all the different advertisements basically are in every window. So it's great, and I have about 15 people looking at me out the window right now. So
That sounds fatiguing.
Yeah, we have to be out of here at 4 a.m. tomorrow, so it's like 3:30 a.m. wake up call. So I told her, I was like, hey, if you want to put me on this level floor, if I'm fatigued, I'm fatigued. If I wake up from jackhammers and stuff like that, so
yeah,
is what it is.
Yeah.
But we have a really great episode for you guys today. We kind of wanted to give a deep dive on some industry news that's kind of going on with pilot hiring. We know that the last year and a half, 2 years has been pretty great in terms of regular standards, but we believe that it could be even better coming up with the news of Hawaii and Alaska starting their hiring, along with Southwest starting their hiring as well. So we'll dive into all those different things. We also want to talk about kind of how we got to this point and what the future looks like, the near term, and maybe kind of the longer term too, when it comes to factors that affect all of us with airplane deliveries, with macroeconomics, and then also with airlines and financially how they're doing and all those different types of things. And specifically with Spirit, we'll kind of deep dive on the last 4 months, but specifically in the last 2 weeks, because there's been a lot of things that have happened. There's been a lot of, articles, but they all kind of go through the same main points, but there's a lot more in-depth information that I think that you viewers would really appreciate. So, Scott, I don't know, where do you want to begin? There's a lot to go through.
Well, let's go. Well, I guess the new hiring numbers all just came out. So let's all start there because it's been a real dry spell for now. It seems like that's going to turn around again. So I think that's a good good spot for us to start.
So going into next year, we're looking at, I'm just going to say the numbers that are projected. And, if you go to any of the hiring events, and these numbers fluctuate constantly. One person will say one thing, but these are pretty, I would say, firm for the moment. United is pretty aggressively wanting anywhere from 2,500 to 3,000, upwards of 3,000 pilots hired next year. American Airlines is over 2,000. Delta has been stated to hire for attrition, and there is a caveat to kind of what Delta's plan, and it's kind of an interesting point I'll try to make later. Hawaii and Alaska, they're starting up their hiring. I can't find numbers. Maybe I think it was like 100 or 200 going into next year. Southwest, for this initial batch they did maybe a week ago, we're recording on September 5th. It was 140 or 150 pilots for ending this year. And then I believe they didn't clarify in their hiring application if this application is going to be for next year as well, or if they're simply just trying to fill the slots for this year. And what I find interesting is there was about 300 people swimming in that pool of CJOs for Southwest before they stopped taking classes. And then there was also information that some people actually got rescinded CJOs. I can't confirm from a firsthand, but I've seen online and through multiple channels of people confirming this, that some people didn't have degrees. So they got, they had to go through the formal, not the full interview process, but they had to go through in Dallas and actually re-interview in a way. And what I saw on the online consensus was they thought they were just going to go in there and check their hours and then be good to go. And some of the people, they started asking questions, and they got this kind of vibe being like, "Oh, I think this is another interview actually." I don't actually entitled to the job yet, even though I got the job 2 years ago, or so. And another person described that they actually had issues with a 121 captain upgrade that they
Hmm.
failed a year and a half ago. And so
Oh,
they really, um, I wouldn't say they rescinded it, but they did not move forward with the application. They went home and then they got an email saying, "We're no longer moving forward with you." So,
interesting.
whatever words you want to use to describe that, that's kind of what happened. So, I don't think that they actually ended up with all the people that had CJOs or getting it. And I bet that it's probably a smaller number that are not having this happen to. But then there's also a lot of people. How many guys had CJOs, went to Delta or United or wherever? Because it's been 2 years. So
Right.
I think it'll be really interesting to see kind of what happens with Southwest going into this hiring application and seeing how many people start getting interviewed. Because I would assume that if they're hiring for only 140 slots, maybe they bring in, I don't know, 200. I'm not too sure. But if you start seeing like 1,000 people start getting interviews, then obviously they're looking for next year as well. And we can talk about it now or later, but the Max 7 and Max 10, specifically with the Max 7, I think there's a ton of those airplanes just sitting up in Renton in Southwest colors, sitting there waiting to get delivered for like the last 4 or 5 years. So I think that if they start pushing those applications out, that's probably a good signal that not only are they going to hire for attrition, but also that, we've all heard that Max 7 is supposed to be any day now is going to get certified. But I actually
Mm.
think that, with Southwest putting their money where their mouth is, that kind of means something to me that that could be a really good signal. I mean, what do you think about all that stuff, Scott?
Well, I think you're right about it depends how many CJOs they throw out because the Max 7 is the big unknown with hiring at Southwest. You know, if they if somebody in the government tells them it's going to get certified and then they'll start throwing the CJOs out and start spooling up training classes. But it's I say this all the time, but don't believe it until you see it flying the first revenue trip, because I learned that in the corporate world. So it's, we could speculate all day on it. It's fascinating that United's looking to hire that many people in next year. That's a substantial number.
I mean, let's
Um,
do the math. 3,000 divided by 12. They're bringing in 250 people every month in new
yeah,
hires.
they're gonna be running probably weekly classes again of
62 and a
50,
half
60.
people. Yeah. 62 and a half people per week, for 52 weeks.
Yeah,
That's ins
that's what they were doing before everybody got scared last year and things slowed down. It's very interesting. We're seeing this new cycle. It's historically, if you were to put it on some kind of chart, it's like every 7 years or so, you see this slump and this rise in the industry. Anybody who's been around a long time would tell you that. But now it's accelerated these bumps. What, three, 2.5, 3 years ago, hiring was crazy booming. And
insane.
then
Yeah.
like a year and a half ago, everything just shut down.
It fell off a cliff.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden now it's, these numbers that are all getting announced, it's about to skyrocket again. So it's like this wave cycle is just getting compressed into a matter of a couple, 2 or 3 years, whereas before it was, every 5 to 7 years was the average of that slump and rise. So that's exciting. It means less slumps for people. I'm excited to see these numbers coming out because it's going to put a lot of hope there. It's just been if you're in the 121 world, everything's been stagnant for a couple years now. No seniority movement really. So this is exciting for people that are in it already because you're going to start seeing movement. If you're trying to get into it, this is exciting because now there's a lot of opportunity opening up for you. I want to say to the people who are, maybe they're corporate guys, CFIs, whatever, you've been waiting to get your 121 slot. I hope you've been utilizing this time very effectively and building your hours and your qualifications and not just sitting in the traffic pattern in that 172 because while we're gonna see some great numbers in hiring, they are tightening the restrictions up again. I've heard rumors that I don't believe them, but I've heard some rumors of them bringing back degree requirements at the majors. I don't think that's a reality. It's possible, but the point being is now they all want you to have that turbine PIC time. They want you to have the jet time. They want the experience. They're not just going to hire 1,500 hour CFIs anymore. You're going to have to go to a regional and put your time in there and get your experience. So don't be afraid of that. That's how historically it was. It was just the last couple of years that was not a reality, which was, mind blowing to most of the people that have been in the industry. But that takes us to, speaking in the regionals, that does take us to another factor in all of this. Go ahead with the numbers.
Yeah, I think this is going to be really interesting to see how this all shakes out this time around. Specifically, how Scott was saying you're going to have to go to regional, build your time, do that. So 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, I want to say it's two, but it all kind of blurs together. But I'm pretty sure it was about 2 years ago. SkyWest brought back their training contract, or I don't know, maybe they never even had one, but they brought back a 5-year training contract, and I think it's tens of thousands, if not $100,000 for the 4 year
I
or
think it's
5 year.
$70,000.
Okay, $70,000 for this contract. What I find interesting is we are having, if these numbers are true, which again, big asterisks there, if we bring in, let's say 3,000, 5,000, let's say we bring in 6,500 new pilot jobs at the majors next year, where are they going to find all those different people for these slots? Because hypothetically, 2 years ago, you're probably coming up on a lot of those people who are just about to upgrade, or if not just upgraded for those training contracts.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the time's a little bit off on that, but you got all the American airline regionals, wholly owned. They all got tons of bonus money. They're not going anywhere if you took that money. I think you had to take the money too. I could be wrong, but I do know there's a lot of restrictions on leaving American airline wholly owns, because I have a couple buddies who went there and they're still there because they took that money and they couldn't get out when times were really good. And then also you have SkyWest, the largest regional. When I was there, I think they were at 4,000, 4,500 pilots. And I think they at their peak was at like 5,700. And when I was there, man, we were losing 20 a day. My number, I just refreshed it every day, and it would just keep going. It was
Great
honestly,
seniority.
I thought that was just normal. I thought I didn't have any idea that. So, anyways, but then you look at also Mesa and Republic. They all have training contracts, and they're merging together.
Yeah,
So
Republic.
we're about to see something that the regionals got really keen on. Hey, why are we wasting millions of dollars on retraining these people and hemorrhaging pilots when we have the control now? So when the next time does happen, that we retain all of our pilots. But that brings us into the other equation of where do they find all these pilots, right? You'd have to assume that they probably have 6 months of CJOs at least at these airlines. So I don't know how many CJOs they've given out, but probably an immense amount. And so I wonder, once all those go dry, where does the minimum kind of come in? Where does the competitiveness get us back to? And I do agree that you're going to have to go put in time, but I just can't see that if we keep this up for 2 or 3 years, you're going to run into this issue where the PIC guys and the regionals all have training contracts, and they've only been there for 3 years. So where are you going to source them? And I wanted to talk to you about this with corporate guys. The other question I have was, in 2021 to early 24, maybe end of 23, if you wanted to leave your corporate job and were this ultra PIC Learjet dude, you had your opportunity to leave. So if you've been there for a decade and now you're at 13 years, other than your own, family situation changing, whatever, why would you want to leave now versus 3 years ago? And so I find that hard to believe that we're going to all of a sudden snap our fingers and get 4,000 qualified PIC, ninjas out here that are going to go scoop up all the jobs. And so it kind of leads me into thinking, okay, well, if the guys are under contract for the regionals, then we also have the corporate guys that have probably been purged significantly over the last couple of years. Where does that leave us going into the next year of large hiring if this comes true? So that's kind of my question to you, man. I have no idea.
Is we're in such a, in the past, I would say, well, the wholly owned regionals, they could just change those contracts at any point. If Big Daddy D or, United or whoever owns the subsidiary or American, if they need people, then they just make a change in the contract. And they're just like, okay, that CJO or that training contract, if you agree to go to the main line, it's no longer, we're not going to enforce it anymore. They could do that. And if they needed to, they would. And in the past, I would say that was like kind of the out. You're right in the sense of the corporate world, you know, because it pays so good right now. They might go after some corporate guys, and they'll get a little chunk of them, but it is not going to be significant. What's going to cushion the blow this time around is Spirit. It's going to be, you're going to have 2,000-ish pilots on the street here very shortly, most likely. You might get a little less. If who knows how this new bankruptcy, which we'll talk about in a bit, goes down, whether it's a full liquidation or somehow they get through a restructure this time around. But it will be there will be probably 1 to 2,000 qualified Airbus typed guys with 121 experience looking for jobs here very shortly if they're not already. And so that's going to soften the blow. I mean, but you're still, with the rough numbers that you had sent me, we're looking at,
That's only half.
yeah, we're looking at like 4 to 5,000 pilots at least they're looking for in the next year or two. So, yeah, I mean, that's going to soften the blow. There's going to be some guys, I tried looking it up. Not all the regionals have contracts. SkyWest for sure does.
It for sure does.
Republic, yeah, does or did. I don't know if they still do. I couldn't find a solid answer, but I know they had like the worst one. It was like $100,000. It was crazy. Yeah. But I don't know if any of the wholly owns do. I know the issue with those in the past was if you were in a flow program, the metering, I believe is what they called it, prevented you from like, if you were qualified, it prevented you from skipping that line because they needed the people down at the regional level. So a lot of guys would quit and go to another airline and then put in a year or two there and then go straight to the main line that they wanted to be at, kind of sidestep it, go around the back door. So training contracts weren't an issue back then for those things. Without the, if we don't, for sure we know SkyWest and Republic most likely have contracts currently. As for the other regionals, we're not sure. As far as I know, none of the main lines have them anymore. The ULCCs, I don't think so anymore. So it's going to be interesting. There's going to be some movement in the next year, a lot of movement actually, which is going to be exciting. But hopefully it was a good short-lived lesson for everybody who just got in the industry on this is the reality, man. It's not always going to be a couple thousand guys a year, rainbows and sunshine, and anybody can walk in the door with mins. The reality is, historically, it's never been like that. We might be trending towards a new norm, which would be interesting to see the industry change permanently like that. But this also could just be, a blip in the long-term history of things, of a good time with some bumps in it. As for the regional level, we seem to go back and forth on whether the regionals are struggling or the main lines are struggling. And so the regionals have been doing pretty good for the past couple of years. The main lines just went through a struggle, and now it seems like it's about to turn around again. If the MAX gets certified and the economy keeps going as good as it's been going, we don't have some kind of looming crash that is, not
It's
likely, but
always rumored.
possible. It's all,
Yeah.
yeah, it's always out there. There's always rumored, but right now with the way things are going, I don't see it happening. Anybody saying otherwise is just scare tactics. So if it keeps going that direction, they're going to keep hiring. They're going to keep I mean, people might freak out in the next few months, but you got to remember seasonally it slows down. With the exception of the holiday months, we're going into the slower period, and that's historically when all the airlines hire, so that they can get all these guys trained up and online by next busy, spring and summer season. So historically, we do slow down hiring in the summer. So, which was a little bit longer this year, but not unrealistically. I mean, I
Right.
believe United's still running classes. American's definitely running big classes. Delta was
My
still
buddy's
running
going,
classes. Yep.
my
Southwest was
buddy's
the only one that cut what's that?
my buddy's going to America next week, so
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I had a
they're
couple.
got to start them up.
Yeah, exactly. Southwest was really the only one that stopped, and that was because they got a max issue. And they put all their eggs in that basket, which is why there's been so many rumors about them going with other aircraft to diversify the fleet. So who knows?
Can I point one thing out
Yeah.
that that I thought was interesting was unlike in post COVID with kind of all the guys from SkyWest and these places specifically was they lost control of being able to dictate where their pilots went and kind of shedding them when they wanted to shed them
Mm,
because they could still go to JetBlue, they could still go to United or sorry, JetBlue, Frontier, Spirit, Hawaiian. There
right.
was there was still a lot of opportunities out there outside of the three other airlines. Now they control where they go and when they want to release those pilots. So they've regained that control back, the legacies and the regionals at the same time. So they get to dictate under our rules when they're leaving for the most part, unless you want to shell out 70 grand, right? They're not like hostage, but you're kind of hostage.
Right.
It's not bonus money you're paying back. It's just $70,000. So that's very different than it was 3 years ago because you lose your free agency a lot of the time in that sense. And I'm not saying it's a horrible thing where you're still making six figures and doing all that, but
Yeah.
they kind of were really smart with implementing this because they knew the retirements were going to continue. And when this upgauge was going to happen, they control it now, not the pilots. So even if it's a pilot market on the regional level moving up, it's really not a pilot market because they control who goes when. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, yeah, if you signed any of those contracts, you're locked in.
No, you have to. That's the thing is anyone in the last 2 years going to a regional, you had to sign it. It wasn't a matter you wouldn't even get an interview without signing it. SkyWest was
Hmm.
making their guys sign the training contract before they even interviewed for the job. So
Yeah, I know some people that walked away from SkyWest because of that.
yeah.
They didn't. Yeah, they're like, no, I don't want to get locked in.
What do you
And
think? Good idea, do you think? Do you think that would have been smarter to sign it? Or is it
well,
too early to tell?
we've had this discussion a few times with previous guests, and I come from the old school. It took me, over a decade to get where I'm at, and there was paying your dues, the cost of entry, the barrier to entry, and that was part of it. You had to get treated that way to earn your time and keep so that you can qualify for the legacy job. And I think we're starting to see a return to some of that. And the younger guys aren't going to like it because they've had it so good for so long. But that's how the industry's always been. I mean, it's supply and demand, right? There's still a big pool of pilots that want to get in, but they don't have the experience for what is going to be required in the next probably year or two now that they're hiring again. Now, if they're unable to get the pilots they need for one reason or another, then they'll drop the requirements again. It's a possibility. That's what happened last time, a couple of years ago. And so it just depends. I think we won't get there just because we're going to have so many Spirit guys on the street. And then there's still a ton of people at Frontier, JetBlue, um
Yeah.
Scott, Sun Country, all the ULCCs, LCCs, even Southwest guys that want to get to United or American or Delta. And so those guys are all just waiting their turn to get a class date.
Yep.
Um, so the big three will never have a problem hiring. Never. There will always be a way for them to suck people up. I think you're going to see, like you said, the regionals got smarter. They locked people in. I don't think it's a bad thing for them doing that. I think it's a smart business move. And I don't think it was a bad idea for anybody who was like a 1,500-hour CFI to sign one of those contracts because now they're getting jet time. But
Hedging
you
your
also,
bets.
yeah, well, no, I mean, it's, you basically they lock you in for what, 3 years or something like that?
5, half a decade.
Okay, 5 years. But then you can come out with the experience to go straight to a legacy. You
Can
don't
I
have to.
make one point for you though?
Sure, sure.
Let's look at someone hired last year, for example. So 2024. I'm gonna pull up if you can put these on the screen, the document I sent you with the hiring, not the hiring, the mandatory retirements. So let's look 5 years from 2024 for United. So the year 2028 or 2029, let's say, they are going to have consistent people coming out. So they still have 685, 2030 is 668. So then they're like the top higher end 600s. And then really by 2033, maybe mid 2035 is when they start going down significantly. And then it goes down to maybe in the low 400s and then continually goes down to the low 300s. So really, we're kind of hitting this peak right now for United. For Delta in say 2029, it's consistent really for the next 4 years after that to about 2032, and then it starts going down to the 300s. Whereas American, so man, they still have a ton in the next in 2024 to let's say 2029. You really missed the boat in this next 4 or 5 years is kind of when all those retirements are happening. And then it kind of significantly drops off. I would say almost 50% of the retirements are gone in the big three in 5 years' time. And so I kind of look at it where is there any other avenue where you could have, you know, got into some other PIC role in a corporate jet to go to, I don't know, JetBlue if they were hiring, just any other kind of role to get you there where, you know, your seniority progression is going to be brutal going from that point. Or maybe not brutal, but like it's not what it could have been, I guess. And so I think it's yet to be seen what happens. And especially if there's any kind of industry blip with financial hardship, then they can just they stop all hiring for the next 3 years and they just let the attrition happen. And that's, 1,500 pilots gone off your seniority list like that. So you see where I'm kind of going with this, though? Like, where I don't necessarily know what the right choice was, but I do agree that if it was probably me, I would do the same thing because it's right in front of me and the job's right there. I don't know what the
Yeah,
other door holds.
right.
But what I do not like, and I'll say this and then we can move on, I do not like how the training contract for the regionals, I'll just say the regionals blanket, I'm not going to name any names, is if you fail any part of our training, we have the immediate right to request the $70,000 from you immediately. So if we determine that, you failed your check ride and we don't want to retrain you, you owe us almost six figures immediately and you're coming off of being a CFI. You're quote unquote bankrupting that person at a very young age or whatever age you are. But I don't think that's ethically right. This is a mandatory training that should be paid for by the company. We're not in the 1990s and early 2000s going get a type rating. And then, I won't, that's not how I subscribe to the aviation industry. If they require me to do that, I'm gone. I'll go find a different part of work because I think I'm not getting used like that. I'm not letting people use me like that personally. So for people to demand $70,000 if I don't meet your training, but I'm technically an employee from you, I think that's kind of absurd. And I think that's kind of sick, to be honest with you. That's my own opinion.
Well, I'd have to read one of those contracts to see the details on it because nowhere, number one, nobody to my knowledge has ever successfully enforced a training contract in court. That's been a big thing about it. And there's nowhere I could see them legally getting away with you fail out of training and then making you pay 70 grand for a type rating that would cost you on your own, 8 grand probably for a CRJ type or something like that, if that, including your ATP. So,
It's
um,
insane.
I would have to read that contract to see if, because those could just be rumors you're hearing on that side of it. I doubt there's anywhere in a contract where they're going to get away with that. I do know there is an issue. I met a guy personally whose son went through it, where SkyWest especially is forcing upgrades, required forced upgrades. Even if the person says, "Hey, I'm not ready," or "I don't want to do it," they force them into an upgrade class, and then if they fail, then they try to go after them for the contract on that, on an upgrade failure. They don't even let them go back as an FO. They just fire them and go after them for the contract. Now, if that's going on, that's some shady business, and that reputation needs to get out there if that's actually happening. I'm not saying it is. Disclaimer, I don't know for sure. I've heard from people that supposedly it's happened to, but again, that could all just be rumor. But if that is happening, it does need to come out because that'll stop people from going to SkyWest real quick, and they'll have to change their attitude if they're gonna if that's a reality, because that's got to be illegal. It's unethical at the least.
I found on Reddit someone posted the actual training contract, and so I won't read all of it, but it basically is saying that each of SkyWest and first officer candidate hereby absolutely and
Irrevocably.
yeah, sorry, waives trial by jury with respect to any matters arising hereunder. So they're saying that you cannot take this to court if you sign this.
Right,
I don't know if
you
that's
waive arbitration and all that.
yeah.
That's pretty standard language in a lot of those.
Okay.
They're not enforceable
Sure.
because, especially if they're unfair, a judge will make it go to trial.
Okay.
Um,
And can I read it really quick just so
Go ahead.
people have this is a disclaimer. Limitation of liability. First officer candidate understands and agrees the first officer candidate, after such time as he or she is hired by SkyWest, will be an at-will employee for SkyWest. First officer candidate represents that the training and experience provided by SkyWest to first officer candidate is of significant value to his or her career. First officer candidate and SkyWest warrant and respect each other, that notwithstanding anything to the contrary herein, that this agreement does not constitute and will not be construed to be an employment contract or agreement, and once hired by SkyWest first officer candidate will be subject to the terms and conditions of that certain SkyWest Airlines collective bargaining agreement. Da, da, da. First officer candidate further understands that SkyWest can make no assurances that first officer candidate can successfully complete any training pursuant to this agreement, and SkyWest can have no assurances that first officer candidate will retain employment. In addition, notwithstanding anything in the agreement to the contrary, in no event shall SkyWest be liable to first officer candidate for any consequential, indirect, special, and incidental damage under any provision of this agreement for any consequential, indirect, penal, special, or incidental damages arising out of any act of failure to act hereunder, even if SkyWest has been advised of or has foreseen the possibility of such damages. So I think that's the
Mhm.
ending part is saying that.
Yeah, they're trying to cover all their bases with that language, basically
So
saying, yeah,
I know that was
yeah.
kind of long, but I just thought that, we hear about these things. This is what I think people are talking about is actually that language. And I'm not a lawyer. I just,
Hmm.
you can do with that what you will. It's an easy post. Just type in SkyWest training contract and you'll see it. It's one of the first posts. So if you want to actually
Hmm.
read it instead of hear me jargon through this stuff.
Hmm. Yeah. Again, SkyWest has been known to be, they're the what are they the only non-union regional, or at least one of the
Yeah.
only ones out there, and they're
Yeah.
also the biggest. That's a trade-off to going to a non-union shop. They can do what they want with you. That's the reality. If you choose to go to SkyWest, these are the risks you're accepting. Now, what I'm hoping is this podcast educates people on that, because it's really hard for CFIs and people. They're flooded by all these brochures and recruiters and things. So I'm kind of hoping this podcast can help people see the realities of that and educate them. But you need to do your research before you go somewhere. I know it's easy to get shiny jet syndrome and go, oh, I can go straight into an RJ. and work for a regional. They're going to pay me all this money, but there's caveats that go with all of that. Nothing's free. SkyWest is known for doing stuff like that. They have very good lawyers to write very good contracts to protect them from you and to protect their money. And that's why a lot of their pilots want to unionize because they want the protections and the fair treatment. I'm not advocating one way or another on that. I'm just pointing out facts of what's happening. So yeah, let's move on from that. We can go back and forth on training contracts and SkyWest
It's
all day
okay.
long.
Well, I don't even know
um,
about that, but I thought it'd be interesting to bring up.
yeah, no, it's good that you were able to bring the fact on it. As for it's going to be same thing. Regionals are gonna they always find a way. I don't foresee them really hurting at any point, nor do I see the legacies hurting at any point. There's
Scott,
plenty
do
of
you know
pilots.
how
Hmm?
many pilots are continually in the pipeline right now for like GA getting started? Do you think that I would like to know how many people have continued starting training over the last, say, 2 years after things actually kind of got a little bit more challenging out there? The first sign of difficulty, did that change the numbers attending the $100,000 ATP school?
Right. Just looking to see if I can get a quick number here on the search. So as of 2023, there were 67,143 student pilot certificates issued that year, uh, a 24% increase from 2022.
That's easy, dude.
As of December 31st of 2024, the total number of airman certificate holders, including students, was 848,000 and some change. So that's all certificate types, though. That's not,
Sure.
everybody with a commercial pilot certificate. So given the 23 data trending, this is AI. So it's estimating there's probably 60 to 70,000 in the pipeline. And that's not specifying stages, how many hours they've got, all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, and that seems like it's been that number in that range for the past several years since they spooled up all the training. That number could go up or down depending on what they do with industry requirements for hiring. The big thing for people, I hope the takeaway a lot of guys see for this is don't don't put all your eggs in the brochure basket. These flight schools, ATP, the big ones, they're gonna tell you we'll get you through in 6 months and give you a job as a CFI, and in a year you'll be at an airline. And that's even in the best scenarios, that's very rarely the reality. It's usually at least double that time frame. The big thing now going forward is they're gonna want experience. They're not gonna want people sitting in a pattern for 1,500 hours anymore. They're gonna want somebody who's got some turbine time, or even just working pilot time outside of CFI, whether that's flying skydivers, you know, tours, aerial tours, um, aerial survey, anything like that. Time building jobs, banners. I met a guy recently who was a banner guy. That was really cool hearing his story and showing pictures. And that's crazy. That's crazy flying, man. I flew a bush in Alaska and I still think banner towing's insane. Um, and the advice I would give to anybody is, man, go get some experience. Don't just sit in the right seat or, sit as a CFI. Go get some real experience because that's what's going to set you apart from everybody else in the hiring pool. And if we do see a change in requirements, you're not going to have a problem. You'll be the guy who walks in the door and gets hired, and everyone else is not going to understand why they didn't get hired. And I might have gone off a tangent there, but
It's
that's the
easier said
reality.
than done, but it's good advice, right? It's easier to say, "Oh, go get a job doing this," and it's like, "Well, man, you see all these things going on in my life. It's really hard to, back away, da da da, whatever." There's all these other excuses that are legitimate. I
Right.
understand, but at the end of the day, Scott's advice is the truth. And if you want those jobs, you got to do those different things. So, it is what it is. That's the industry it is. So there's only so many, power off 180s that are going to be tangible in an interview saying, well, why in the last 5,000 hours have you just stuck doing this? Why haven't you won and diversified? So you're absolutely correct in that sense of like there comes a point when single engine piston time is it, it's not all that relevant.
Hmm.
If you have continued progression. So I think we're good on that subject. I think we made a lot of good points. Should we head into Spirit stuff?
Sure. Yeah, let's talk about Spirit.
So, do you mind if I take it
No,
to
go
start
for
with?
it.
Okay. So, I think a lot has happened in the last 4 months, but really it's been kind of all crescendoing down to the last 2 weeks or so. So, I want to go through for people a kind of a deep dive on what's been going on at Spirit. We hear a lot of stuff that, they haven't changed their business model, they're not doing well. And I want to give actual data for you so you have a better understanding. And if you don't really care about the numbers, then feel free to, fast forward, do whatever you need to do. But this is really tangible information that I believe gives you a good understanding of where they are. So Spirit went into they filed for bankruptcy protections on Friday evening after the markets closed. So that would have been August 29th, I believe. And that was the second bankruptcy they called out of Chapter 22. And again, I don't want to say that I'm some like lawyer or financial guru. I'm just simply looking at the facts, and these aren't that hard of facts to understand, even for a freaking pilot. So I'm just going to say that hypothetically. You can do it. You can do whatever
Even
you
a
want.
pilot can do it.
Yeah, so if I can do it, it's not like I'm making wild speculations on. It's just this is what's actually the truth of what's going on there. So, and really quickly, Scott, I want to say one thing to you. I thought about this yesterday when I was thinking about this idea. I don't want to seem like I'm going after the demise of these guys' jobs because I have a family now. I provide for people. I do all that. Not for 1 second do I believe that, like, this sucks, dude. Like, this is not what anyone wants to see. It ruins people's lives, literally, and it just sucks. So I wanted to point that out. We all have empathy for everyone in that situation. We know Connor, and Connor's a great dude. I met him right before he got furloughed back at your crash pad in Vegas. I know him, and he's a great dude, and it really sucked, and he was really stressed out. But I saw his hustle going through things. So if Connor can do it, there's so many other guys there too that I have faith in those guys being able to land back on their feet. So I wanted
Yeah,
to
and
say that
Connor's in his G550 initial now. They bought a new plane. So,
it's
yeah.
awesome. So I just wanted to preface that because I don't want someone to come at me in the comments being like, "You're an," because I'm really not trying to be an. I'm just trying to update with the information I found about what's going on. So, anyways, I digress. Really, the real reason they went into bankruptcy, the initial kind of pinpoint was Aerocap, and Aerocap is the largest airplane lessor in the world. There's a really great episode with the Aerocap chairman and CEO on Airline Confidential. I would like to put that in the show notes because it gives you a good understanding of what that business actually is. So, Aerocap owns 37 of Spirit's A321 and A320 Neo jets, all Pratt and Whitney, and they also own the delivery slots for all those Neos coming forward too, at least in 2027 and 2028 of what they still have on their books. Long story short, Aerocap looked at their financials and looked at kind of the payments and non-payments and said that you are now in default, for better terms, on all of your future airplane deliveries based upon your current financial state right now. Each defaulted airplane has a $2.1 million penalty. So if we have 37 times 37 is 1369 times 2.1. So what is that? It's a lot of money, basically. 37 plus 37. So 74 airplanes times $2.1 million, $155 million of cash would have to be owed to Aerocap. And I don't know if that money probably could get negotiated in a timeline, but they don't have $155 million of free cash lying around. So that is kind of what forced them to go over the weekend and do bankruptcy protection and do basically an emergency bankruptcy on Monday where they had to go to the court. So that's kind of the pressure point that happened. But I want to take everyone back to kind of the last 2 weeks specifically before I go into the real numbers of what's been going on. This is the timeline. So Aerocap leaked that they're shopping Spirit's planes and to other airlines. So that happened, I believe, on a Monday, and that was released to Bloomberg and Wall Street Journal. Then it was released maybe 2 days later that Spirit hires PJT. PJT is a consulting firm that's done the Spirit and no, I'm sorry, the Sprint and what's the other telecom, Scott?
AT&T.
Sprint. Yeah, Sprint and AT&T. They just finished that merger. They dealt with Latam and their bankruptcy. So these guys do like heavy duty M&A along with bankruptcy filings. So they hired all these different kind of firms. They hired two other firms as well that specify in these kinds of things with airlines strategy, with their route and their network planning, and basically revising what they needed to do. And then I believe another 2 days go by and Bill Franke of Indigo Partners, he gets on his Gulfstream on a Monday morning at like 8 a.m., flies out to Fort Lauderdale, has a meeting with the chairman of Spirit Airlines, and they met for about a day and a half in Fort Lauderdale. Maybe it was a little bit less, but that plane took off on a Monday, came back on a Wednesday night. Then the next day, it was leaked to routers and Bloomberg as well from the Spirit Airlines corporate division of some sort that they had a meeting. The next day after that, on Wednesday they got done with the meeting. Thursday it leaked. Friday, after the markets close, Spirit announces they're going bankrupt again in Chapter 11 filing. So, I mean, there's a lot of different sequence of events that have occurred in the last couple of weeks. I find it hard to believe that all those different events happened out of thin air. It seems pretty strategic in my mind that all those different things kind of happened. Where if you look at the AK for Spirit, they got served on Monday that they were delinquent in that sense. So really, from Monday to Friday, all this stuff happened last week. And so what I kind of wonder is what's Bill Franke up to going out there? And, in the last couple of days, Airline Confidential had a really good talk about what they saw Bill Franke there for, saying that he's setting up for a garage sale, basically. His
Mm.
words, not mine, of a Chapter 7 liquidation or something of that nature where they are first in line for the assets. I don't know. I'm going to stop you. I'm going to stop there before I go into kind of the actual financial situation there. But I wanted to kind of get your opinion on all that information I just said so I don't ramble.
All those things, you and I have been following this pretty closely. We've talked about it many times. We've talked the numbers. So we kind of saw this coming. So something that I think we talked about it yesterday offline, but I looked it up. So, because I wanted to verify it. So it was only 171 days from when they emerged from one of the fastest Chapter 11s ever. Their chapter, they filed in late November and they came out early March of a bankruptcy, which is insane. 4 months or something.
That side of
Then
the business too.
it's insane. Then 171 days later, they filed their Chapter 22, which is the second Chapter 11. It is likely one of the fastest, if not the fastest, Chapter 22 filing in history. American Apparel has, I believe, the next closest one, which was 9 months, and then Toys R Us was 11 months.
Okay.
Spirit's looking at much shorter period of time, like four or 5 months. So that, going in and out of the first one, we had discussed it, and I have been watching it, and I'm going, there's no way this makes sense that they were able to get in and out so fast and get all their debt restructured and refinanced. And now they're trying to do it again, and they've changed nothing, and they're out of cash. They just, I'm sure I don't want to take your thunder on the numbers.
Don't go for it.
Yeah, but they just pulled their revolver, right? So they've literally maxed out every available penny now to them, and they've got under $500,000 in the bank, and they're going to burn through that in a couple months. It sounds like.
Yep.
So there's no path forward that is seen. So I don't know how they can how they can Chapter 11. They should be doing a Chapter 7. I don't know what their plan is. I'm sure, it'll come to light in the next week or two here. They're going to have to start disclosing this information, but it's just mind-boggling to me that they worked through a bankruptcy so quick, that somehow they got it signed off so quick. When that happened, I was flabbergasted. It just didn't make sense to me because they didn't come out with a new plan. Like, it wasn't like they changed their business model to prove to the court, like, hey, we're going to cut all these routes and these airplanes and restructure and do this so we become profitable. All they did was restructure debt. And all that did was buy them a few more months. So, which we talked about a few months ago. I mean, I remember back in April, May, we were like, there's no way they have the money to keep operating past July. And then August came around and we were both like, well, I guess we were wrong.
We were not far off of the reality.
Yeah, they scrounged up some extra cash, but the numbers just never lined up. And so I don't know there was a lot of talk in the industry about Frontier trying to buy Spirit and merge. To my understanding, having listened to podcasts and some experts, it seems like Ted Christie went out of his way to block that. I don't know why. So they got rid of Ted and they brought this new guy in. And I believe it was Doug Parker, who was on a podcast, who said that they brought this new guy in to close the deal between Spirit and Frontier, which seemed to make sense at the time. But then negotiations seemed to stall and fall apart at some point. And so it just didn't make sense to me why that fell apart, unless they found something in filings or in the records that Frontier was like, or Indigo was like, nah, we'll just wait till this falls apart and pick up the pieces, which is what seems to be happening right now. So if you get into it, United and Frontier are now picking up the routes that Spirit is dropping. This week, Spirit just dropped 11 major cities, and United and Frontier have both gone in and said, we're taking over those routes and we're picking them up, which is kind of what a lot of us saw happening. We definitely saw Frontier going for them because it just makes sense. Spirit was their only competitor in that sense. United is probably trying to go in and, United is always trying to compete with Frontier because they're both Denver-based companies and there's history between the CEOs. So it does make sense that United would come in and try to pick up some of those routes as well. But I don't know where we go from here, because I find it very difficult to believe, considering the current administration and their policies, that Spirit is going to be able to convince the federal government to let them get away with another Chapter 11 with no real plan or money. One thing I did look up, was that generally, if a company is going to do a second bankruptcy like this, they generally have the funding in place, like they did the first time.
Debtor in position.
Yeah, they have their financing in position. They don't. Spirit didn't. I think they panicked and they're like, oh, we were supposed to have a deal by now with a merger, and we don't know what to do. I guess we'll file bankruptcy again. I mean,
well, that's why they extended their revolver and went the full $270 million. They needed to. They could not. It would be insolvent at that point if they did not do that.
Right.
So they did that to basically, they didn't have any financing in place at that moment. And I think what people need to understand is it was a prepackaged bankruptcy back in November. This is not a prepackaged bankruptcy. This was, hey, if and this is where the big thing is, if Aerocap would have went after those assets, every single one of the creditors would have came for theirs as well. They would have been shut down immediately almost, because that's 76 airplanes and everyone else is basically, the blood's in the water. The shark will circle and you're dead in the water. So if they did not do that, their Spirit would not be existing right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's not like a far take. That's why they filed on Friday and they had that money put in place. So in essence, every single one of their assets are encumbered at this point, meaning they've already taken out loans against every one of their assets. There's very little left that they can go in and try to get money for. So they've tapped every credit source they have. They're literally done unless
Yeah.
they get more funding.
Well, who the hell's going to give them any money?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, really,
It's
if you could think of anybody, I'd love to hear it, but it makes no sense.
the difference with Indigo buying Frontier for what it was they bought them for $25 million. This is not $25 million. This is significantly more, and it's an extremely risky bet. I wanted to circle back on a couple things, but I don't know if there is anyone. Long story short, dude, I don't know if there is anyone because they don't have anyone yet. And I think if we don't hear something in the next 2 months, there probably won't be any. And I just, even if they can fund their bankruptcy, who's going to take them out of bankruptcy? That's really the key. And that's yet to be seen because they just don't have the burn rate and they don't have the actual cash available to be able to do this. So I want to go through that here in a minute. But just to go back to what you said about United Airlines ads, I'm going to list out the flights and some of the things that Spirit closed. From Houston, they're adding, these are all extra flight, one extra flight per day. In Houston, they're adding from Houston to Baltimore, Guatemala City, Atlanta, Vegas, New Orleans, Miami, Orlando, San Salvador, and El Salvador International. If you can pick up, these are all focus cities between Spirit, by the way, and these are all hubs of Spirit. So just an FYI. Newark, they're doing Chattanooga. That's a new one. Spirit just started doing that route, so they're picking up excess out of there. CAE, which is South Carolina, I can't remember where it is exactly. That's another
Charleston?
Spirit route. Yeah, Charleston. CHS is Charleston, so I think it's somewhere else.
Okay.
Fort Lauderdale, they're doing an extra flight in Orlando. Chicago, they're doing out of Fort Lauderdale, Vegas, New Orleans, and Orlando. And out of LA, they're doing one extra flight out of Vegas. That is every single one of Spirit's hubs and focus cities. Spirit is exiting October 2nd, so not even a month away. Albuquerque, Birmingham, Boise, Chattanooga, Columbia, South Carolina, Oakland, California, Portland, Oregon, Sacramento, Salt Lake City, San Diego, and San Jose. So they're only keeping John Wayne, LAX, and I think that's it, and Burbank. They're keeping 3 LA airports, and that's all they're doing in all of California, which is basically the entire Vegas base is getting hosed right here. That's all they're flying for the most part. So that's kind of where they're strategically already kind of pulling the ripcord on some of the stuff. But let's go through the actual like financial results they have. Revenues fell 20% year over year to 1.02 billion. Expenses were up to 1.2 billion, 118% of revenue. So they're an 18% profit loss, which is a $184 million operating loss and a $246 million net loss. And that's about $82 million burned every single month. And what people need to keep in mind, this is in the second quarter, one of the best quarters of the year. So what I wonder is, we're in September now in the shoulder season. What does the burn rate go up to then? And in that sense, when they tap that existing revolver credit, let me go through this. Cash has kind of collapsed. At the end of 2024, Spirit had $1.19 billion of liquidity. By June 30th of this year, it was down to $407 million. Fitch Ratings, which is a credit rating basically of for investors, Fitch Ratings reported $473 million of operating cash outflows in the first half of the year alone. They lost almost $500 million in 6 months after the bankruptcy.
Which we predicted. Yep.
To stay alive, Spirit drew its full $275 million revolver in August and sold $250 million worth of spare engines and parts in July. This emergency moves bought the airline a little more time, enough to enter Chapter 11 with cash on hand, but the burn continues. And so what I want to kind of go through here is Spirit entered this bankruptcy with $2.8 billion of debt still outstanding, $856 million in 12% senior secured notes due by 2030, $275 million revolver fully drawn, $636 million in enhanced equipment trust certificates, $849 million in secured aircraft loans, plus some unsecured debt, including federal loans. So that's kind of their structure of the debt. But in the end of the day, they have about $500 to $600 million of cash available at the moment. Well, if they're burning $82 million, the government nor the bank or the court is going to let them go to zero, obviously. So in that case, you know, to circle everything back, United is adding these flights starting January 3rd, I believe, or something very close to that. If you think about, okay, well, if they have $500 million minus $82 million per month, that's $240 million probably in the end of the year, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. That lines up pretty much with kind of where the exit is here. So I for better or worse, if we don't see funding being put in, then yeah, I think probably by the end of the year is about right. Where at some point the cash on hand and the creditors are saying, how much money does it make sense now that we've burned all this cash to get our money back in pennies on the dollar? What's going to make more financial sense for pennies on the dollar, if 5 pennies on the dollar, or 4 pennies on the dollar from trying something else?
Yeah.
Um, that's kind of the way I see it. And I don't know. I don't know where they go. And, they want to get rid of all the Neos and all these things, but man, I don't see where it kind of the happy glimmer of hope is. I guess it just seems like uncontrollable kind of tailspin at the end here with no way out. And maybe I'm talking out of my ass, but man, I don't think so in this case, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. You know, we talked the numbers before. We have a little more clarity on the numbers because they just filed again, but
Yeah.
it all lined up mostly with our suspicions, and we were just a couple months off, and there's no, from my perspective, I don't see a way out for them unless some angel comes in and buys them up. But there's no indication right now of that, and why would you? According to the filings, they have $2.4 billion in long-term debt. They're not worth anything. There's no assets for someone to come in and buy. They have so much debt that even all their aircraft aren't worth what they owe. And now that they're starting to fall apart, there's no incentive for the other airlines to come in and take them because they're like, oh, we'll just wait for them to fall apart and pick up their routes. And
Yeah.
and we don't have to assume any of their debt or risk. So, yeah, man, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I don't foresee them being able to, with what information they've shown so far, I don't see them being able to successfully convince the court of another Chapter 11. It just doesn't make any sense. I'm not a lawyer, but as an outsider who's been paying attention to this, I don't see it. I don't see them creating convincing argument, unfortunately.
Yeah. One last point I wanted to make on this subject was I actually listened to the first entire day of court proceedings, and so it was really interesting. I spent about 7 hours going through and listening to the first day hearings, which is a lot of times just saying, "Hey, can we have the money to pay our pilots? Can we have money to pay our utilities so we don't have, you know, basically critical things to run a business?" And they did their opening remarks, and the guy who represents Spirit basically said the first one we did was not the true bankruptcy. This is going to be the one where we go out and change everything, and we want to do this for the American public. Da da da. And then kind of what you said before, the lady from the Treasury Department came on and was like, we're all very familiar with each other because it's the exact same people that were here 9 months ago, not even 9 months ago. And so it's the same guy doing the bankruptcy case, the same judge, the same law firm hired by Spirit, and it's the same, all the same creditors and everything. They just went through this. And she said, well, we have to figure out kind of what you were saying, Scott. Why is this the fastest ever Chapter 22 and what has changed?
All right.
And until we can answer that, then she's just like, I don't know what we're doing here. Like, what's going on? So If you type in Judge Sean Lane type in Judge Sean Lane calendar, you can actually see his weekly calendar of what they have on the docket. So when you do that, you can see on 11 a.m. on Monday, so next Monday, on Monday the 8th, it goes through all of their filings of what they're going to be talking about. So this is a really good understanding to see kind of what's on the docket, and things can be added from what I've kind of researched. And you can actually go up and sign up for being included. If you want to listen in on what's going on in the court proceeding, they will send you a Zoom link if you sign up. Well, at least I got the Zoom link, so I don't know. There was only 50 people in there, so
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Well, I guess we'll find out. They have to have a meeting, I think you said Tuesday, and they're obviously going to have a few more, I'm assuming, in the next week or two after that. So I assume we'll get more concrete information and insight into what's going on really over there, what the reality is of their survivability. Well, how long they can survive under the current circumstances.
yeah,
Because there is no long-term survivability given everything we've seen so far. So yeah, we'll definitely follow up on this in the next couple weeks. I think that covers all the bases for today for what we were going for. So I think it's a good place to wrap it up. Do you
for
agree?
sure.
Yeah.
Yep,
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening again. We're trying to get back into the groove. It's been a crazy summer for the both of us, and
it's
it's been
dang,
wild. But things are starting to stabilize a little bit. Things are slowing down in the fall. So hopefully we'll be able to get back on a more regular schedule of posting podcasts. And we appreciate everybody that's listened to us and supported us so far. We really enjoy doing this, and we hope we're bringing you content that you guys enjoy. Again, some of the guests we've had on recently were recommended by viewers who sent us messages. So, you can send us autopilotonpodcast@gmail.com. Autopiloton.com is the website. There's a contact link there. You can hit us up on Instagram at autopilotonpodcast, I think is the full link on Instagram, and reach out. Leave us a comment on any of these. We're on YouTube, Instagram, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Got the website. We're on X as well. Leave us a comment. If you have suggestions, we'd love to hear them. And we'll probably if we can get a hold of the guest you're suggesting, we'll gladly bring them on. So yeah, if you are going to reach out, let us know how to get a hold of the person you're suggesting. That helps us a lot. And thanks for tuning in again, everybody, and we'll catch you on the next one.
have a good week. See you guys.